So I have to repeat all what was already just said,
No worries.
because we had a malfunction with microphones, because we are not professionals yet. But Anton, thank you very much for coming.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, we would like to give a big shout out to our mutual friend Slav, who introduced us.
Indeed. Thank you, Slav. He's an awesome guy.
Because otherwise, I don't think we would ever met. Because world is very big for people who have a lot of things to do, and I don't think we would ever see each other just randomly on the street. And even if we would never get some deeper conversation, because the one we already had was quite nice, and I got a lot of different topics I want to go over today with you. First, let's start with you. Your introduction. We already pretty much did that, but we have to do it again. So tell me more about yourself. Where you grew up, when you were born, and what is your background? You are Ukrainian. That's hot topic nowadays. So let's go.
That's right. So January 25th, 88 is my birthday. Born in Kiev, Ukraine. Spent a lot of time in the city as well as in the village where my grandparents had a little farm. Rural Ukraine is so beautiful. Most of Ukraine is rural. These beautiful rolling hills, forests, rivers, lakes. Did a lot of camping with my parents in early childhood. So I learned to make campfires and spent a lot of time on canoes and things like this in forests. So I love nature. I feel very much at peace in nature. My father still is actually, and has been for the past 35 years, an orchestral musician in the National Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine. He's a percussionist. So I grew up around classical music and going backstage in this beautiful hall in downtown Kiev. So I would say I had a kind of an idyllic childhood in Ukraine, although we were so poor that at some point we had 8 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment. You don't hear much about that, from the modern American collegiate youth in terms of what the communist life was like. I guess they weren't really disappearing people at that point, but my mom actually went to the city with me on her shoulders and a sign saying, we've got 8 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and the government, instead of silencing her, gave our family a free apartment, which is quite unusual. Thanks, Mom. Yes, and then, so I actually had a pretty bright vision of what the Soviet Union was sort of supposed to be, I think. All the architecture, because both of my parents were artists, my father a musician, and my mother was a painter and a poet, and she had been a theater actress. So I think some of that was sort of passed on to the way that I looked in the world and the way that my mom taught me to see the world. She would always point out little details and say, look at these little bristles in the raspberries and things like this. She was a very loving woman. And, I felt a little bit of that vision that what the Soviet Union was supposed to be. As knowing nothing about politics, I had this affinity for kind of the architecture, and I think it was my parents' love for each other. They divorced when I was 6, and my mom came to America, worked here for a year, met a man, my stepdad, who proposed to her a year later and brought my mother, my sister, and I to Chicago. Yeah.
Do you have more siblings, or just you and your sister?
So I have a brother through my father. He still lives in Kiev, works in IT. Very intelligent guy, very talented musician. I love him. I see him about once every year and a half. When I go to Ukraine, we spend a day together, and that's all we need to keep in touch and to keep up with each other. Yeah.
Damn, that's quite a lot. So when you transition from late 80s, from former Soviet Union to I mean, not in 80s, but you transition in late 90s. But still, there was such a big difference within the East and the West. There's no question about it. You could see the difference right away at that time for sure. Even nowadays, there's still big difference as well. How was it for you as a young guy? Just all of a sudden Chicago, and now what?
It felt like winning the lottery. In a sense.
Really?
Yeah, I could feel this door being opened. I was on the shore of a great adventure where a window was open and the sunlight came in. It's hard to describe in a sense, because childhood is very bright. Our senses are very keen, and usually hardships are easier to endure in childhood. And I can't say my childhood was very rough, although we were quite poor. I had a pretty happy childhood, spending a lot of time in nature and so forth. But I'd never even seen a big city in a picture or in a movie at that point. I think the closest, this is kind of funny, I had this video game, I don't know if it was Atari or what. There was this game where it was a superhero duck, and there was this loading screen where he was flying across a kind of metropolitan skyline. I remember seeing this skyline, this, super pixelated skyline, and getting this feeling of like, oh, I'm like, wow, this could be a real place. And then I came to Chicago, and it was I was so happy.
How's Chicago back then?
It was cool. I went to see the Bulls. Michael Jordan was already gone, but I did see Scottie Pippen.
I think like all those American cities back then had their own spirit. Nowadays the spirit is kind of gone, and it's all just become a place where people just care about money. And if you don't have money, then you are facing other consequences of being in the city. If you don't have money.
Definitely.
Even when I went to New York a couple of weeks ago, like all those old buildings, 5-6 stories, are gone. And instead of that, you have tall skyscraper buildings, mostly just banks, insurance companies, stuff like that. You go to Little Italy, you see like that they're still demolishing those, and then you're listening those like mob stories, and you're like, that's completely different New York. So that's probably how Chicago was back then in the 90s as well, right?
Yes.
It's open city.
Of course, being there as a child, you don't know as much about what's going on politically, economically, and so forth. But it definitely had a charm to it and a soul and character that I feel is completely gone at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how many years did you spend there?
So from 96 on and off, I'd done quite a bit of traveling even in my childhood, thanks to my parents. Until I joined the army, I guess, in 2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
What made you to join the army? Was that something that is in your background, family background, or you just...
Excellent question. It is in my background in that my grandfather participated in the Second World War. He was 17, so he wasn't allowed to be in the army, but he was a fireman on a train that took supplies to the front line Ukrainian soldiers who were fighting the Nazis.
Damn.
Yeah. My grandfather is an amazing man, and maybe we'll get to him. Other than that, my father did mandatory service in the Soviet army. He was in a marching band. Although he was very, very strict, very harsh, and so he would wake me up as a kid and he would go, "Platoon up!" And he would say these weird things as if he had been some combat veteran, where really he just played the clash cymbals in the army. But other than that, it was not in my family background. I had some inspirations, one of which was Ron Brockman, who was a very accomplished surgeon in the Navy, and he had a prolific career, very interesting man, and he was kind of a mentor to me for a year when I lived in Kodiak, Alaska. And one thing he told me was, if you ever don't know what to do in your life and you want to do something honorable and worthwhile and give back to this country, you can serve. And he said, your mom will probably not want me to tell you this, but that's, he said, it's an honorable path. And so my mom ended up dying of cancer in 2005. So I was 17, living with my stepdad in the suburbs of Chicago. And I just had no direction, not much purpose. And I got into watching war films. Film is something I've always loved. And there was a point when something just clicked, and I thought, this is a good way to go. And I just knew I wanted to join the Army infantry.
Most of the young guys who joined the Army or Marines or Navy, they told me that they went there to find themselves because they had very similar story to yours. Not necessarily that they lost their parents, but they knew that they don't know who they are, and they wanted like prove themselves, like that they are capable of doing stuff. And the Army is, I think that's one of the reasons why Army is there, either to give you a second chance or either to kind of like help you like find who you are, because they're gonna give you tasks that you have to do, and normally you wouldn't pick those tasks in regular life situations. You try to avoid them, right?
Yes.
So they kind of like show you. But speaking of your grandfather, you showed me this video that you did, and not only that we can see how your grandfather looked like, but also I like the way how you film it. The end of it is very touching. And I have to say he looks really, really good for his age. He was 95 when he passed.
He was 95 when he passed, shortly
95.
about a year after this was filmed.
You're lucky to
mentally
have this
sound.
footage then.
Yes, I've been very lucky to have him. He was almost like a biblical character to me.
I really like this scene. It's maybe when you were filming that, you were not even maybe thinking how good this is gonna turn one day. But now watching this, when he's just like leaving and going somewhere alone by himself, man, that's really something. That's
Thank
really
you.
something. Most guys wouldn't even think of talking to their grandparents or even parents. They would think, oh yeah, mom is dumb or dad is dumb. They don't know what I'm talking about, you know?
I spent 3 months with him in the winter of 2020 at the end of the year, and I'm so glad I did. I got to know him better than ever as an adult, and it was...
Yeah, I mean, definitely if you have someone like that in your family, that's him. He looks like
yes.
pretty big badass.
Yep. He had some beautiful things he said all the time, one of which God keeps giving us life, so we have to keep living it. And we're on this earth to be kind and to help one another.
Did you ever talk to him like during a World War II, like which places he was involved at?
I know he operated out of Znamenka, which was actually the town where he was born, and it was a major railroad crossing. So I know he operated from there, and I know that he worked on as a fireman on a train, heaving coal, taking supplies to the frontline soldiers in Ukraine fighting the Nazis. Geographically beyond that, I don't have anything by memory. I'd have to rewatch the footage with him.
Isn't it kind of amazing that part of you were there with him? Do you ever think of that like that? You know, imagine if it would be like anywhere, let's say close to Stalingrad or something like this.
Yeah.
And you were there with him. Part of you were there with him, and you
That's a very interesting way. I never thought of it that way.
you know,
Yeah.
just imagine that. But so I was doing one interview with a guy who was veteran in World War II, American side, and then his son came up, and his son was 70. It's kind of
Wow.
weird to meet a son, and the son is 70 because
Yeah.
the dad was 90, 98 or something like that. And I asked him the same question, and he said like he's thinking about it every single day because if some bullet would hit him, he would never be born. And
Yeah.
I mean, indeed, this is very dangerous situation to be somewhere on the front,
Yes.
or if he works on the railroads, that's the first thing that the enemy wants to
Oh yes.
destroy. So, I mean, when you first time told me that your grandfather is still alive and he was involved in World War II,
Yeah.
just this by itself is very unique. So,
Truly.
big respect.
Yes. He was an
So,
amazing man.
if we will move forward from the military of your grandfather to your personal military experience, I would like to know if the military was what you expected it to be, or your actual deployment made you think about military in different way than you did before. Because it's one thing what they tell you in the office when they're hiring you. They're full of promises and full of crap. And then once you go to Iraq and you see the reality there and you see what the army is all about, good and bad and ugly, you know? Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Surprisingly, overall, I think the military was what I expected it to be, which is funny to say because I think it's because I didn't have expectations.
Okay.
What I did know about it was, even though I didn't know anything about this country politically, I didn't really know much about its history. I knew that it was an honorable thing to do. I knew that we would not be conducting war crimes. And I knew that soldiers were allowed to use cameras when they were deployed. I had some feeling of like the cultural zeitgeist. I had seen some footage on the internet of soldiers in the American military, and I think because I was aware of what the Ukrainian military was, which is where they demoralize you and they beat you, and it's a very different thing now that they're all united and they have a clearer purpose, but I also knew that we wouldn't be beaten. so I kind of knew those things, and I knew that I was in great shape because I had a very athletic childhood. These are some of the things that went through my head, and I thought, I've endured rough conditions. I've camped throughout my life and so forth, and so yeah, we got into Fort Benning, Georgia, where all the infantry goes to basic training. It's 2 a.m. on April 12th, 2006. I had long hair, like almost to my shoulders, which everybody made fun of me for later, which they shaved off immediately, and we got our uniforms. And they used to call me Sunshine at one point. I guess it's from some movie, Remembering the Titans. You know, I loved it. I loved the basic training, AIT at Fort Benning. It was awesome. I just kept my head down. I have a funny story from the first day. Can I share that?
Sure.
So we're in the bay. We've got our bunks and everything, and then the drill sergeant, we're all, standing there. He's saying, all right, we're about to go get chow. And I said, if anybody here thinks that you're in good enough shape to eat sweets, go ahead, get yourself some dessert. I don't mind. So that's what I thought I was in good enough shape. So we get to the chow hall, and I get my food, and then I go to the dessert section, and I get a piece of cake. So I'm sitting there and eating. We're all eating very fast, hurriedly, and the drill sergeant comes by, and he goes, Private, what's your name? And I go, Klopatov, drill sergeant. And he says, Klopatov. Klopatov's got a sweet tooth. Okay. And then we get back to the bay, and he's like, well, since Klopatov has a sweet tooth and he thinks he's in good shape, why don't we all do some sit-ups and push-up? And he smokes the whole bay for 30 minutes.
Oh, my God.
I was like, this is unfair. You said I'm in great shape. You said if I thought I was in good enough shape.
Welcome to military.
Yes. So I feel like I got in at the sort of very end when things were still, I know that the rotation right after us, they were experimenting with having these stress cards. They gave like 2 stress cards to every soldier. I think they ended up squashing the system. But apparently when
the military
stress cards. In basic training, when they got too stressed, and the drill sergeant was yelling at them.
That seems like some woke crap to me. That was
yes.
2006.
That was the beginning of it. Yep, way back then. And they could apparently show this on like 2 different occasions that he would stop. Unbelievable, right? Like you could pull that and show the enemy, and he would stop firing. He would cease fire for a second.
Stress card.
Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to go to Iraq, and.
So you went there right after the basic training?
I first got stationed at Fort Stewart in Georgia with 3rd Infantry Division, and we continued to train there, I think, for another 6 months. So we had some really good training, really great training, I thought, and I really pushed myself with PT, and I thought I was a good soldier. In retrospect, I wish I had aimed higher. I think with my fluent Russian and being physically fit and having some capacity, I've been told that I might have been, I might have gone to officer candidate school and so forth.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yes. At the time, I thought U.S. Army Infantry, 11 Bravo, grunt, follow me. Like that was elite enough for me. And I'm very glad that I did that. And so 6 months of training at Fort Stewart. So we got the Bradleys, and then we deployed. Yeah.
Tell me about your Iraq experience. What it was all about. How long you've been there, and things like that.
I think I had a very unique experience. I got what I wanted out of it, and it could have been much worse. I know that God was watching over me, and I think it was only by His providence that I survived. It was a 14-month deployment. We got there. We got to Forward Operating Base Falcon. Thousands of people. This giant Zeppelin hanging over the whole base. It's a system that detected incoming mortars and gave a momentary alarm so people could dive for cover. And then about a week after being there, maybe 2 weeks, we pushed out into sector. So we got into our Bradleys and Humvees. We drove out to a sector that was essentially uncleared. And we had a final destination, which was an abandoned horse farm. We were setting up what was to be known as Patrol Base Murray. And we went on foot, and we had a bomb squad with us, clearing the way in front of us, and it was like a 36 or 38 hour mission to start with. We were just awake and clearing houses, pulling security, stopping to drink some water now and again. And finally we got to this abandoned horse farm, cleared it, and started to set up shop there. We ended up building that up fighting positions on the roof of this structure. At first, we were living in this apple orchard that was on this abandoned horse farm. And I think it was on the third day that we got mortared. I think we're 60 millimeter mortars that came in. I remember I was laying on the grass there next to my buddy, Michael Fritz, who was my battle buddy. Explosions, smoke, and one of our leaders yelled, get into the Bradleys. The ramps were already down, so we ran into the back of the Bradleys. The ramps came up, and we could hear in the neighboring Bradley next to us somebody screaming like at the top of their lungs. So that was our first lieutenant, Dixon. A mortar landed pretty much right between his feet, right in front of him, but only partially exploded. It was a dud. And he took shrapnel, I think, on his foot and his leg. And it was a dud. And if it hadn't been a dud, it probably would have killed him. So that was like the third day there. He got medevaced and we got a replacement lieutenant. And we started doing foot patrols. And it was a rural area, 15 miles south of Baghdad, on the Tigris River, called the province of Arab Jabor, also known as the Sunni Triangle or the Triangle of Death. And from the intel that we got throughout the deployment of 15 months total, we did 14 months for my unit, our battalion found 2,500 IEDs in that time period. Buried bombs everywhere, indiscriminately. Civilians were hit by these bombs all the time because they would just be in farm fields and so forth. So I think it was a week into it when there was a local village woman and her 2 or 3 children stepped on a bomb in the middle of a farm field, and all the kids died, and she had most of her limbs blown off, and she didn't make it, probably for the best. So that was the beginning of that deployment. And we were living outside. Didn't have showers. We were just using baby wipes, and we had a pretty good supply of bottled water, so we were washing ourselves with that.
Mm-hmm. How did you deal with that harsh environment there? I mean, it's nothing compared to Chicago. Chicago has maybe tough winter, but what about this one? That's another extreme. It's opposite. Dry.
Yeah. It was pretty hot. We were there. I think it was August.
So I'm assuming all those patrols had to take place at night, no?
No.
Really?
They were on a rotation, so some were at night, some were in the day.
Well, during a day, it must be super hot with all this equipment.
It was. So you just get used to being covered in sweat. Your equipment is drenched in sweat, and it's got that smell of ammonia. But you just keep drinking water. They were always reminding us to hydrate.
Well, if you can smell it, it means you are alive. So
yes, exactly. Yes,
that's good.
We trained in Fort Benning and Fort Stewart in Georgia. It's very hot and humid.
Mm-hmm.
And then we spent 2 weeks in Kuwait before we deployed, actually acclimating.
Mm-hmm.
So
makes sense.
It was. I think mentally I was preparing myself for when I would have to potentially pull the trigger and see something a lot worse. So that, I think I was mentally just adapting. I was 19 years old. At that age, it's easier to adapt mentally than when you're older.
Yeah.
So.
Damn. So, I mean, all those like patrols and clearing those buildings and stuff like that, you must have seen some crazy stuff, right? Does it come back to you once in a while?
So, I think I was very lucky personally. I didn't have to do anything that I would later regret or have to think about twice.
Mm-hmm.
The main threat for us was really the IEDs and mortars, because it was a rural environment and we had such air support presence, and we just outnumbered and outgunned them. We rarely got attacked in a kind of close quarters combat environment.
We got some pictures from your deployment. Maybe you can. Is that you?
So that's my
doesn't
that's
look
my
like
buddy Patterson, Casey.
Uh-huh.
I think he's from Texas or Arizona originally.
Here you are.
That's me, kid.
Little boy.
That's right.
That's really little boy, man.
Yeah,
I can
look
tell
like I'm
you
15, right?
yeah, you're fresh. You're fresh.
Yeah,
No need to shave or anything.
that's right.
That's why you had the long hair, because you wanted to shave at least something, right?
Right.
Yeah, well.
Yep. This is in a pump house. This is an electric station, local electric station that we actually repaired for the local community so that they could run their irrigation systems for their farms. We also, while we were there, set up a route for the children to be able to go to school, because the kids were not going to school because it was too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually secured a route for them, and we actually did some humanitarian work that while we were there, it seemed like it was actually effective and worthwhile for those people.
Mm-hmm.
Distributed medical supplies and provided medical aid. We set up some temporary
How much
stations.
support did you get from them? Because every time when I speak to someone who was in Iraq,
Yeah.
the experience depends on the location and time when people were at the location. So when you talk to someone who was there at 2003, it's different than 2006, or
Yes.
it's different 2015, or it's different now. So how was it for you
So
when it comes to the civilians? Did they
so
mind, hate you, or?
it's hard to say what was really going on in their hearts.
Yeah, based
we
on their-
had some very.
It's
For
more
the
like-
most part, I got the impression that they wanted to have nothing to do with us to be able to preserve themselves, because
Because it's dangerous for them.
eyes and ears everywhere, and you know. But there was a program called the Concerned Citizens, or also called the Sons of Iraq, where we would document volunteers, do retinal scans, and they were allowed to carry AK-47s, and they would help us to hold down security checkpoints.
Mm.
So
Is that this guy?
that's right.
Okay.
Yes.
How did you feel next to someone like that holding AK-47, knowing that he is friendly, but is he really friendly?
To be frank with you, I felt like he was a brother.
Yeah?
That's how I felt. It might have been naive. I'm sure there were certain Sons of Iraq or Concerned Citizens that were insiders and that were not did not have our best interests in mind. But this guy here, I felt like we had a kind of a soul connection. So
The reason why I'm asking that because I read the Jocko Willink book Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
It's right there, and he was describing Ramadi in 2006, and he said that once they give them the local Iraqis to work with them, it was very hard for them because they had to pay extra attention to them, because they were never sure if they would do or not do something, and also it was very hard to explain them some tactics or something, because they don't know left, right, and they don't know how to count. So if they told you go 3 doors,
yes,
that way, he doesn't know what 3 is.
right.
So that's why I'm asking that.
Yes.
It's kind of hard because you guys have like that expensive training and all the time and
Yes.
effort put into it, and that all is crushed always by that weakest chain in
Yes.
that whole link, and that can be one of that. So that's why I'm always asking pretty much everyone if they had, what was their experience with locals,
In that regard, I felt like we kept them on the periphery, so they would never be involved in a serious mission,
Okay.
or really even in a patrol. They would just be holding these checkpoints somewhere on the outskirts of our
Yeah,
our
okay.
sector.
Got it. So something that it was not that necessarily to keep Americans there,
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yes.
So those are the vehicles you guys been using up there.
Mhm. Those are the Bradleys
Mhm.
that were our homes for a period of time, and this is how we slept under these.
I mean, the explosives that they are using and that they are burying in there, are they able to kill you once you are in that? I'm not talking about disabling the vehicle, but about actually killing you. Like, is there any chance of that as well?
From my understanding, we could get concussions, we could get hurt, but it was unlikely to be killed by an ID in a Bradley. I'm sure there are many instances of that, but in our case, from what I know, we did not encounter that.
How about if you would get like a direct hit with like RPG or something? Would it survive?
From my understanding, it would. We have explosive armor all over on the back here. You can see it on the sides, so it would theoretically blow the blast away from the Bradley. And we did have a Bradley that hit an ID, and it was a private Duffy, and he got a concussion, but he was fine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did you were able to go along with different culture, but not just culture, but different religion? The religion there is the main thing.
That's right.
It's pretty much ruling the life.
Yes.
Not like in our society. We can pick. I don't have to go to church, or I can go to church. Up there, you cannot, at least from my understanding, you cannot be really like, oh, I don't care.
Right.
And you, as a person of faith,
Yes.
different faith, how did you process that?
At the time, I was an agnostic, actually. Yeah.
So that helped?
That's a good question. Things would have been very different otherwise. I would say I would have been much more culturally aware. At the time, I had sort of, how can I say this? Like many people, to me, religion was just religion, and there were different kinds, and they were all equally true. So I had a bit of this, I think what they call multiculturalist philosophy going on in my mind, that it kind of rubbed off on me from just general American society, which is like, well, everyone has their own way. No way is better than another way. And so I thought it was fascinating. I've always had a respect for deeply religious people, because it was always obvious to me that to be truly devout, whether it's Orthodox Jews or Christians or Muslims, to me, it looked like a more difficult path than to simply not bear that burden of responsibility and to do whatever you want from day to day.
Makes sense.
So, there were prayers 5 times a day, and frankly, I didn't think much about it. I just kind of tuned it out. I was doing a lot of reading. I was doing a lot of photography. I think that was my main creative outlet, which kept me going. I brought a camera with me, and so glad I did that. That's something I've been doing since I was 9 years old.
Interesting.
Yes.
So overall, are you glad that you had this experience? I mean, that's the photos are stunning. Look at that. Look at that.
Yes, this is a long exposure shot.
Yeah,
Tower guard. Yeah.
I mean, it must be for a young guy who is 18, really not knowing much about life or what he wants to do. Like, this must be very unique experience just because of the adventure.
Very much so. I would say easily this shaped my life. This shaped the way that I think and the way that I am for the rest of my life. I mean, I remember being there for 2 months, the first 2 months, and it felt like it had been almost a year. That's how slow time was moving. There was just so much going on.
Yeah.
It was such a different world, living and sleeping in the same uniform every day, on a concrete floor or on, these little cots eventually, eating the MREs daily, saving that butter bread in my cargo pocket here. I had a little spoon that I got from this abandoned Iraqi house. I had a little teaspoon that I would use. I kept it in another cargo pocket.
See, and those things are things that people don't usually associate with military. They only see a war and you go there and kill people and stuff like that, but they don't see that this process is transforming boys to man, because you are keeping this extra bread and spoon in your boots. Because most people will tell you, oh, you have to wash the spoon before you eat it. Well, you are glad if you have a time to eat and if you have something to eat, So you
That's
are
true.
like, there are no guarantees. There's no like, here you have guarantees. I go to Walmart and there's always going to be something to eat. And if not, then I don't have to deal about anything, because it's going to be Armageddon all over.
Yes.
But here there are literally no guarantees of waking up, even if you're a civilian, or even if you are some radical fanatic, or if you are American soldier being there on the soil. Like, there are no guarantees. So that must form you for the rest of your life, because no matter what situation you will go through here, you will always know that you went through something worse.
It's very true. It's very true. It's very sobering. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
And they say it's all about from where it's all about perspective. And this gives, that's my team leader, Seth Anderson. He's got kids now. He's a great guy.
perspective is the whole thing. And I think that's one of the things that people are missing nowadays, because they are so focused on those little tiny topics and they are not looking on the world from more like higher altitude.
Exactly.
They don't see the connections within stuff.
Yes.
And once you see kind of this, you kind of realize that there are different realities going on like right now. And we are not aware of that. That's why we take for granted things that those people would be not even being able to imagine.
Most definitely.
It's crazy.
In the Russian language, there's a word called istina. My stepdad is writing a book called Pursuit of Istina. And to me, this is kind of this, yes, you can state a fact and that is the truth, but then there's the istina, which is where you have this bird's eye view, or you just look at the whole picture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what perspective tends to give in these kinds of experiences.
Do you think that these kids are gonna have better future with you guys being there, or used to being there because you are not there anymore, or without you? What do you think is better for them? You being there or you not being there? I'm not saying like you, but you know what I mean.
100% us being there.
Mm-hmm.
Is the way that we occupied Iraq, was that, were we culturally aware? Was it strategically sound? Most definitely not. Did the administration at the time know what they were doing? What were the motives? I can't really speak to this much. I mean, the way that we pulled out, obviously, we fumbled it, and all the good we did seemed to have been undone with the creation of ISIS, with the power vacuum that we left. I know that when we were there, like I said, these girls here are walking to school, something they could not do before we arrived. And they knew, I'm sure they knew that when they went past us, they were not afraid of us. I'm sure some of them weren't. Some of them were, because they may have been indoctrinated at home. But
mm-hmm.
I think we brought peace and sanity to the areas that my unit occupied, from what I could see.
Joko said the same thing, and he finished this question or similar question that someone asked to him by saying that when they were leaving Ramadi, there were less murders per year than in Detroit.
Wow.
That kind of stands for something.
Amazing.
Right? It's like it goes from like 100 incidents per year to 50 to 20 to 2 or a month, or I don't know what was the time frame, but it was significant drop. It's crazy. So I'm like always trying to ask the same questions to different people who've been, as I said, different times, different locations. All kind of fits one story. Like you all have the same answers, same types. So I never actually met anyone who would tell me that it was bad for the locals.
Right.
That the fact that you guys are there, So how long this whole experience took? A year?
14 months.
14 months?
14 months.
Okay.
Yep.
And the 14 months includes the 2 weeks in the Kuwait before and stuff like that? Or
no, I think it was 14 months on the ground.
On the ground,
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'm not even expecting you're going to answer me that, but money-wise, was it worth? Or it's more the experience that it gets you? I know. I know.
Money. Most definitely the experience.
Exactly.
It's not something you can buy. I don't care how much money you have. I worked in fashion and in high-end men's fashion in Hong Kong and in Singapore. And when I was in Singapore, I was working for this very, very, very wealthy family. Wonderful family. And people would come to the store, and I dealt with multimillionaires and perhaps even billionaires. And you just cannot buy character.
Mm-hmm.
You can't buy experience. You can't buy soul.
Mm-hmm.
You just are who you are, and and I could just tell the way that some of these people looked at me, and they were like, "What is that something? Explain this," or and
yeah,
it was a blessing to have this experience, and I'm so glad that I enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a couple more interesting stories, or at least one.
Well, we got a story here that you sent me with our former president.
Right.
You were actually able to meet him. So
Yes.
let's check it out. It's on TikTok. It went quite viral, I think.
But yeah.
I'm not even gonna play the sound.
Okay.
But that's one of the tramps rally, and he salutes you on the
National Live TV.
on National Live TV.
Yeah. That was a...
I like how you played it a couple times, so just make sure people get it.
It was that was a life-changing experience, because the reason I moved to Florida from Chicago, I was actually going into the healthcare industry. I'd become a CNA, spent 5 months working in a nursing home before COVID, and then moved over to working in the emergency department at Lutheran General Hospital in Park Ridge. Very educational experience, and I was seeing COVID happen in front of me, politics in Chicago, the riots, and I was feeling less and less welcome in Chicago. At that point, I'd become more kind of politically engaged, and I made my politics known, and I had all these people that I had known for 5-10 years, some longer, that were calling me like a racist, a monster, a bigot.
That's crazy, right?
That knew my heart, that knew that I was actually working at a nursing home. I mean, I'm sorry, $14 an hour to do this work. This
crazy.
Yeah, so I came to Florida. This seemed like the sanest place at the time, and this was kind of the cherry on the cake. It was like the proof. It was like God showing me that...
Were you glad you took the uniform with you?
Oh, very much so.
Because otherwise it wouldn't happen, right?
That's true.
He saw you there,
Yes.
and
I didn't think much about it.
you think Biden would salute you?
I don't think Biden could even go up those stairs at this point. But that aside, from what I heard, the administration doesn't have much respect for veterans.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I don't think that, even if Trump hadn't personally noticed me there, somebody on his team might have told him it's part of their values is to respect the military.
Sure.
It's part of the patriotism of this country. So I still would have been honored if Biden had saluted me.
Yeah, sure. It's the president.
Yeah, it's a president. And being a first, an immigrant from Ukraine, having served and been saluted by a former president of the United States, that was quite an honor. Yeah.
Interesting. How did you spend the rest of your day when that happened? What did he do? Did he celebrate? Did he go to IHOP to get some pancakes or something?
I went back to the VFW where I was working as a bartender at the time, and all the guys were there, and they were like, "Anton, we saw you on the TV," and we all sat and talked about it. It was awesome. All these
good.
Vietnam veterans.
See, this is what life is all about. It's not about just sitting at the pub and bitching. It's about living a moment. Most people, after certain period of their life, have nothing to talk about. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't meet anyone. They know the same people. They've been in the same job, meeting same co-workers, meeting same people after work, watching the same movies, everything is same, and then going once in a year to Egypt or to some destination just to kind of escape out of the problems or out of their reality, instead of like living the reality as you kind of wish. And it can be through many different jobs. But I think you are one of the few great examples that I know that can actually say that, because even if you mention the states where you lived, you mentioned China, you mentioned Ukraine experience, you mentioned Chicago, you mentioned this, you mentioned Florida,
South Africa, Hong Kong, Singapore. Yeah.
See, so all of that is making your opinions and views on the world. And then you will have someone who is just sitting in Chicago in some cubicle office or whatever, knowing you for 10 years, and they will come and say, well, that you are racist. Because you will say that you don't like democratic policies, or you don't like mandatory jabs for anyone who doesn't want it. And they will tell you you're a bigot, racist, and fascist, and all this crap.
Yeah.
Like, those words have empty meaning for someone who lived as much as you did.
Yes.
That was driving me literally nuts nowadays, that people who have they have no capability or whatever to criticize you, they do that, and they do it so loud that it annoys you. Because if they would just do it, like, whatever, you wouldn't care. But they're not scared or ashamed to stand in front of you and just scream that to your face.
Right.
I cannot accept that. It's crazy.
It's difficult to accept. It's even more difficult to have empathy and compassion and humility for those people.
You cannot have even conversation with them. It's hard.
Yes.
It's really hard.
What I'm really interested in now that I've actually, I feel like I'm closer to God now more than ever before, after having just spent 4 months on a commercial fish tendering boat in Alaska. Such peace out there, such clarity. And one thing that I already had this notion, I've already been going down this path, but I really want to put my faith above politics.
Yes.
And because Western culture is built on Judeo-Christian values, and I think it won't work without true faith and belief in God. I think bridging that gap and giving those people a way in. Because a lot of people truly have just never had a good male role model in their lives. They've never had a true adventure. They've never had to endure certain hardships that teach lessons. And I think we should have the utmost empathy for those people, especially when they have so little identity that they feel like they need to do all this stuff to themselves, color their hair, and women that need to, expose themselves to feel validated. I mean, these people are so lost. I think they need our love the most.
They need to eat more dirt once they are kids. That's
definitely one way to put it. Yeah.
That's definitely like the way how you can eliminate all of this crap.
That's true.
But you mentioned one thing that we just noticed with Slav. We've been talking about this for last couple of weeks, but like almost every day. I'm noticing more and more people are just coming with all those like crazy colors in their hair, and you can always see it's like one type of people, and it's always 3 colors. It's kind of like a ugly green, blue, and pink.
Yeah.
But it's not even nice color, and it's not even like a color. It almost looks like some certain cult, just part of the head, or just the end of the hair, or something. And we've been noticing, and all those people, they kind of look the same, just white. You see, they don't go outside. They are kind of like, you can almost put them in one box. I always feel like such a bad vibe from that presence, I don't know if it's the color. I don't know what it is. But like we've been talking about it, I'm like, bro, it's like more and more appearing in public. And it's like, it's crazy. We don't know what it even stands for, but it obviously stands for something. We probably don't even understand it, but I'm always like paying attention to this. In California, it's really big. So once you mention it, I'm like, damn, even he noticed.
Oh yeah.
People are noticing.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, all those struggles in life and everything that you go through made you who you are right now. All that adventures, good, bad, ugly, made you who you are right now. Like, who knows who you would be, who you would be if you wouldn't have that? You'd be maybe some suburb kids with a lot of energy, just gangbanging and shooting around.
That's right.
Because you have to spend the energy somehow.
Yes.
So you mentioned the Hong Kong and South Africa and Alaska and obviously Iraq. Which place or which state out of those was the most life-changing for you? Was that the Iraq, or was there something? It doesn't have to be. You know what? Maybe not. Maybe I would ask that way. It can be 2 different countries if the change was, let's say, in different field. So, for example, Iraq taught you this, but China something else. If there was really like some life-changing like a place when you went and said like, damn, that's how I want to spend, let's say, next XYZ years of my life because of this.
With my Asia experience, which was Shanghai, where I taught English, waiting for my work visa for Hong Kong, working for the Dutch company Suit Supply, great company to work for. And then I spent 6 months in Hong Kong and about the same time in Singapore. That was actually when I first became politically aware for the first time in my life. Before that, I was naive and ignorant about American politics, and I was one of those people who just didn't want to look into it, but I could see it was a heavier burden to carry to know the truth. The truth is not always easy. But I finally realized that these people truly have a different way of life. I mean, they truly think very differently. These people have never heard of freedom of speech. It was just a very different place. And in these various places, like when I went to Beijing, it was martial law at the time, and the president of China at the time was having some meetings there. And there were soldiers in all the street corners, and soldiers marching in the streets, and all these giant city blocks were cordoned off, and you had to go all the way around, and they checked my documents while I went across the street under the road. And it felt like what I would imagine North Korea to feel like. I mean, you could feel this
tension,
this heavy this pressure in the air, with this darkness. That's how it felt. When I got to Hong Kong after that, it felt the closest thing, in a sense, to America. After having been in Asia for so long, there was definitely, the air was just much more free, and I fell in love with Hong Kong. It has a very deep soul character like nothing else I've ever seen, and I look at pictures of it with nostalgia and longing. And that's why China's going to destroy it, and they're going to try to eradicate that culture as much as possible. But it was when I was living in Singapore, and I saw this very spiritually dry place. This is how I perceived it at the time. In a sense, it was, I'm sure, to a degree, a reflection of my own inner state. I was working in retail, selling clothes in this giant, beautiful mall. But what I saw was just this ultimate consumerist society. These people were just fine dining, shopping. That's really all there was to do. And it was this, this metropolis, this global, international, financial hub that had been erected in like 50 years. Before that, it was just a jungle, more or less. And that's when I first started looking into to politics. And then once I started digging a little deeper into that, I saw that this entire belief system that I was indoctrinated into, feminism, environmentalism, identity politics, anti-religion, it was all connected, abortion, gun laws. It was all, I saw how it was all connected, and that started to open my mind. And so for that's what ultimately led me to move to Florida years later. So that was my experience in Asia. I would say my experience in Iraq obviously shaped me as a young man and gave me a lot of discipline.
Different shaping. Yeah. Like it was more like a fundamental being a man, and this was more maybe like a political awakening to kind of like understand where are you belong. It's kind of hard to say, but everybody belongs somewhere. And I feel like you realize that you don't belong into those color head lines, that you belong to somewhere else. Maybe Jordana Peterson is going to be standing next to you more than somebody who is on the other side of the spectrum,
I'd certainly much rather meet Jordana Peterson than any other movie actor or celebrity out there.
Yeah, because there's real celebrity. It's a real guy who really changed the life of a lot of people. But that's what I kind of meant, that you kind of realize like who you are as a person when it comes to the values and moral standards that you set for yourself, maybe as a child already by your parents, when they were example or whatever. And yeah, that's... I was thinking about that you're gonna have like something. I'm sure like that Iraq didn't shape you politically,
Right.
That's why I was kind of like thinking like which of those countries, which one really like shaped you. But China, damn. I'm gonna actually talk on Monday with a guy who is living there 12 years. We're gonna call 12 hours difference, so it's gonna be funny, but I'm gonna ask him some of those tough questions, because nowadays it's really turning into like strong dictatorship, which people are not really aware of that.
Yes, China is really indiscriminately taking over the world, and they've already shown that they're willing to play dirty, and
it's crazy. Do you have any intentions of returning there again, like just for visit, vacation, or
I would love to see Hong Kong again. I've always wanted to see Japan. It seems like an interesting culture.
Yeah.
There's elements of some very traditional values there and discipline that I like.
Japan seems very interesting.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it for a lot of years, because it's, I don't know if it's because it's island and it's like isolated for the rest of the other big, huge, like countries around, because they're tiny compared to most of what's around them, but for some reason it seems to be as a very friendly, unique Asian experience of in a traditional way. I'm not even talking about Tokyo or some large city, like a huge city, but I'm more talking about that suburb area or the villages, and you wake up somewhere, you see just the locals, you see how they live, how they go through their life, good and bad, I'd like to see that. I'm
in the same boat. I mean, Tokyo will be interesting to see for a day, but Japanese village life would be it's like a dream.
Exactly. Maybe I'm more like idealizing it, But
I wanted to mention something,
sure,
because this is along the lines of some things that you said now. So we talked about celebrity and Jordana Peterson and also tourism, like so there's a book I'm reading called Image. I don't know the name of the author right now. There's only one. It's called Image, and it's about how the American and global media has changed. How it used to be people actually just only reporting stories when something truly, really drastic and phenomenal happened. They kind of left it up to God's kind of providence to guide them in what they would report. And of course, that changed to creating these breaking stories in advance and to where this 24-hour news cycle and so forth. And the same with tourism that started where people no longer went to see the authentic life of these other cultures and to try to understand their values and the differences of life. And was this, how do I feel about this? But they were given this kind of prepackaged experience of luxury and essentially as much comfort as possible. And the same thing as they had back home. Mm-hmm. And finally, the development of celebrity, which is the idea of being famous for being famous. Mm-hmm. That didn't always used to exist. People actually used to be well known for their achievements, for their moral character and so forth. So when it comes to talking about those people with the, the postmodernists with the colored hair, and you can call them the social justice warriors or the woke
just losers.
Progressives.
Yeah,
you can call them losers. Again, like for me, I want to bridge that gap, and I want to be able to treat everybody with love and humility. But
you can. But there's always, from this point, there is no one I would look up to him or her, because it's not even him or her, because they have many different ways how you can even ask, call them, or whatever. And there's never any role model that I ever saw from this group ever, and I would say, damn, what a man. Well, you cannot even say that. What a person, like you cannot even say that. Like on the other side, I look on the other people. Like I can give you so many great examples. Yes. Jordana Peterson, one of them. The way how he's able to speak and the way how it resonates with you inside. Yeah, the guy is spitting a truth.
That's right.
But he's spitting a truth in a way that you already know, but you would not be able to say the way how he says it. He's able to really express himself, and every word has meaning. Every word is there for purpose. And that's why I like that. When I'm listening to the other side, I don't see the common sense in any of that. That's why you can be willing to accept, you can do whatever. You can do as much as you can. But if the other side is not really trying to do anything, then you are welcoming, you're accepting, but they are not.
Yes.
And it's very hard to deal with someone like that, because you wouldn't be against anything they do if it doesn't become a politics, and if it doesn't affect your life and the way how you are supposed to raise the kids and stuff like that. You do your thing, that's fine, but we are here doing our thing the way how we were taught, the way how our parents were taught, based on the values and based on those values we are here today. That's if there wouldn't be those values, we wouldn't be here.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, if your grandfather would say like his grandmother, you wouldn't be here, because I'm assuming his daughter, your mom, would not be born.
That's right.
So a lot of those people who are pro all those things don't actually realize how thin line is between being born and not being born. And it's a really miracle that you are here, and you should really spend your time wisely based on things that really matters, and not on something that is used just for politic influence and purpose. That's how that's my take on that,
I totally agree with you.
It's very hard to deal with people like that, very hard. I feel like that this is the main thing that is destroying America, like that ability not be able to agree. That's why a lot of people, they love Trump and they want Trump to be president. I understand that, but I would rather see there Ron DeSantis, who is way younger, and just by that fact that he doesn't have that ego like Empire State Building, like Trump, maybe some other people from the other side would be able, after maybe listening 5 minutes of DeSantis, would be able to take his stance on things, because they will never take Trump's stand on anything, because it's Trump. And that's not a way how you can unite the country. You need really someone who has a common sense, but also you unfortunately need someone who's gonna take some of those people. I'm not talking on the left like crazy part, talking about the independent people.
Yes.
Who are kind of like always the one who are deciding which direction is the country gonna take. So being like too much on one side is gonna make no good for this nation. It's proven like by years.
Yeah, I think it's about being more sort of pan-determined in the sense of being able to take multiple perspectives at once and appeal to a larger audience.
Yeah.
Than just to the people who already agree with you.
Your China experience is a perfect example. You see what the country is doing, which way they're heading. Meanwhile, we are here fighting with our own neighbors. Why? Like, my neighbor is not my enemy. My neighbor has the same language, same whatever, you know, like me. The other guys on the other side of the planet, I don't even understand what they're saying. And based on their steps and their yelling, I kind of feel like that they don't think like I'm their brother as much as my neighbor, you know? So that's what's really like, in my opinion, killing the country the most is the division between the people. And there's really like there is no sight of some certain unity. They only talk about it. Oh, we have to unite and like, but nothing is gonna happen.
Right.
Like, you know? Like just the idea that Biden's gonna come and everything is gonna be united. It's like a joke. It's a joke. It's not. You cannot even take this serious. You know.
No.
But that's why I'm really hoping for some young blood coming here and like, you know, young blood like you, someone like who seen the world, see the people, and put up the value in order to not harm anyone. You know, make the world the way how they feel it should be the best, but it's kind of hard, but at least you are not harming anyone, you know. But their policies are literally harming people, which is crazy. I'm glad we moved from Chicago here because we moved from, I think our reasons are very similar, you know. Is there something you are missing out of Chicago? Like something that, you know, you wake up in the morning and say, oh, damn, I wish I would be in Chicago doing this instead. Or is there something like that?
No, not really. Not really. No, I've matured a little bit since I left Chicago. And I think one of the major pulls for me and probably for a lot of people to live in like a major metropolis is just kind of the, you know, the nightlife, being around, you know, other young people, dating. And that's something that I've put a lid on now. Thank God. Yeah, so I with this last trip to Alaska, it's given me so much clarity, and I feel like I've finally been able to
conquer your demons.
Yes, and to resolve to sacrifice the sin that I was addicted to, and I just want to focus on God and my family and my friends and developing myself when I'm ready, which should be quite a while from now. I might become open to meeting a woman again, so as to have a family. But there's a quote by Solzhenitsyn, if I can remember it. Solzhenitsyn, the author of the Gulag Archipelago, he was very much in love with the Soviet Union, and then he went to war and saw it for what it was, and he wrote a letter to a friend back home, and the letter was read by the government, and so he was sent to a concentration camp. And most people these days don't even know what a gulag is, you know, or that there is a far left, like the communism has killed more people than the Nazis ever did. And but he said, let me see if I can get it, only through voluntary inspired self-restraint can people overcome the world stream of materialism. So I don't think that anybody can, you know, as they say, you can't legislate morality.
You have to find
you can't legislate spiritual growth, and to be able to temper our appetites and seek that istina, or the deeper truth, or it's not going to happen through politics. However, I obviously through politics we can create more auspicious circumstances for that to happen.
But it's also not gonna happen if you're gonna be at home watching TV or playing Xbox. You know?
That's for sure.
That's what the whole understanding of who you are and what the world is about. Is about you being adventure and you doing things. It's not about, okay, now tell me what it's all about. No, you have to go and seek for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You have to go and you have to be willing to risk. You have to be willing to lose.
Yes.
You have to be willing to just put your skin up there and see like what's gonna happen. Otherwise, you are not gonna learn.
That's right.
You can learn something from your parents because they'll tell you, oh, don't do this. This is hot. It burns you. Yeah, you remember that. But then there are other things. You know, how about, you mentioned dating. That's quite interesting. When you go to different culture, Iraq, Hong Kong, other parts of China, South Africa, Alaska, like, is there something that dating always has in common, no matter where you at? Or there are just certain aspects that you have to always remember when you are in different environment? Something you have to learn before you're gonna even approach a woman and ask her out. Like, I'm sure, like, asking a woman out in China is different than in Florida, you know?
Yeah.
Must be, like, is there something you would like to tell us about that?
Well, if you had asked me this question a year ago or 3 years ago, I probably would have given you a very different answer. Now it would be just
empty.
Don't. It just depends on where you're coming from. I mean, my goal now is to view women as, you know, as sisters, as daughters, as mothers. And I'm very keenly focused on staying on that path because I spent so much time objectifying women. It's kind of how I was raised by my father, who has since changed. I love him very much, but it's a trap. You know, there's so many young men that they give in to that lust, and that lust after women. They're always looking for their next girl, and it's such a tragedy because there's so much more to be achieved in this world, so many adventures to be had, so much true growth. So different countries have different cultures, and actually more traditional culture in China. I would say that they're actually doing right. I don't know if you know this, but they actually banned like effeminate men from their like media. And
even from army, they just ban being a weak, like in general. Like, it's not culturally appropriate anywhere besides the West to be, as a man, to be weak.
In that regard, one thing I want to say, sort of for the record, is I think that there is a force that is acting from without the United States. I don't think it's a natural progression of liberalism. To a degree it is, but I think there's definitely another force that's sort of sponsoring this this deconstructionism, this postmodernism, this cultural relativism, and this like demoralization, destruction of the family unit, and
porn and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
You can even see that like on Instagram. It's a big thing. Every time when I see some hot chick on Instagram, I go through the bio and I will see, let's say, okay, she has a post when she's almost naked. It has 30,000 posts. I will send it to my friend. She's kind of like with me on this. We are always making joke about it, and I send it to her, and then I will send her similar post, but like 2 posts under, for example, but it doesn't have any ass, it doesn't have anything, it's just a picture of nature, and it has like 30 likes. And I always send her a first post, put there 30,000, then the second post, and put 30, and we are always laughing about it, like how people only care about like what you just mentioned, you know, just seeing like the thing. They don't care about the person. They don't care about what's written under the post. They only care about this, you know. And you talk to those guys who are working in those companies who are creating the algorithms for that, and they will tell you that they have a specific systems that are able to determine if there is ass on the photo. So the photo goes up, or it goes to certain people to be seen, you know. It's gonna be really referred to guys who are like 18, as you said, 18 to 30, you know. So it's definitely a systematic thing. It's not just all of a sudden this weak mindset, like, and also like mentally and spiritually weak mindset that is taking place here. It's like all calculated, planned, and it just goes along. It's crazy, man. It
really is. It's an abysmal thing, and it's vacuous, and it just sucks you in. And once you give into it, it's very hard to take a step back and
So you said you are in the process of moving.
Mm-hmm.
You are gonna be spending the last few days down here in Florida.
That's right.
Well, where is your life taking you now?
Excellent question. Hopefully closer to God, but closer to my family and friends in Arizona. My stepdad is quite sick and he needs to be cared for, and I've invited him to come live with me in Arizona so I could care for him. As I said, I'm a CNA, so I hope to be able to give him a better quality of life than he has now, living in Chicago. Beyond that, I'm finally looking to launch my videography and photography business, something I've been interested in my whole life.
You should do that, man.
Thank you.
I've seen some things, even the grandfather video. It's great. Just, a quick interruption to the previous question that I asked. It's not about the way how you film it, but it's about, at least from my perspective, that you saw your grandfather as an asset, as a something or someone that has a great, I would say maybe huge value to what he is saying and the way how he present himself, what he lived through, and your understanding that this moment is very important, keep alive for as long as possible through the video that you can do. That's not something that a lot of people who even do videos for a living would do, because they would think, oh, it's boring, but they don't see the real value of it. Maybe 20 years after that, they would regret. Yeah. So when you show me that, I like the way how you put it all together. It's not just like some weird camera, whatever, nice setup, whatever, but also like you can see that you are truly speaking with him because you want to speak with him. And I can see it from that. And that's why, like, when you said you want to do videos and pictures, yes, you are the right person to do that, because you are going there with this intentions or this point of view. You don't go there to create another ad for Nike,
right? Another
ad for McDonald's. You go there to film what you want to be seen, and that's always a way to go. Like, just there was a short interruption, but I had to.
I really appreciate that, Mike. Thank you for that.
Because not every time. So, quick story. I was dating a chick, and her grandmother was presented during a mobilization in 1938, when our men were marching to the main railroad station to go to the bunkers that were around the whole country. And she said to me, I have never seen such a bravery in the eyes of young men to defend their country. And she said it, and she was crying. And her granddaughter had no idea what she's saying, because her life motto was, oh, I have no reason to learn Czech. Meanwhile, this reason was sitting next to you. You could have such a deep conversation with your grandma, and you didn't care. Yeah. I was so glad that I had this experience. If there is something that I will always be thankful to this woman, it's always gonna be the thing that she introduced me to her grandma. Nothing else really, But that part, I will never, ever forget the way how she said it. And I guarantee if I would film that, man, that was like crazy. You could feel the emotions out of it. It was really. And your grandfather was similar thing when I saw this short clip.
The greatest generation, they call them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, truly.
So Arizona, how long were you deciding to go there? I mean,
actually, my best friend came to me in Chicago during the time of COVID when I was working in the hospital, and he came to me with his girlfriend. He said, "Hey, we're thinking of moving. We don't feel welcome in Chicago anymore. We're being treated like we're the enemy here.
Yeah,
taxes are high. Yeah. The weather sucks. There's really no nature here. A lot of crime. It really doesn't make sense to live here anymore." Yes. So he said, "I've done some research, and I'm thinking maybe like Colorado Springs or somewhere around Scottsdale in Arizona," according to his research. So we did a road trip, and also my buddy William Sellers, who was in my platoon in Iraq, he also joined us. And so we did a road trip from Arizona up through Utah to Colorado. Beautiful, beautiful land. And I was thinking of joining them, but after spending 3 months with my grandfather in Ukraine in the end of 2020, I decided that I was just so appalled by the world situation. I actually felt like I needed to check out Florida. My friends understood. So I've spent over a year here. And now I've come to the conclusion that these people, as much as I love my brothers and the Iron Disciples here, my Bible study group that and I love Siesta Key Beach, and I love the drum circle that I participate in, and this is a great place. I'm most certainly coming back here. But my best friend, my niece, who's there, and her family, and the captain of the Rondies, Mark, he lives in Prescott, and taking my dad there, it all kind of clicked for me. So that's where my life is going next. I honestly don't really know what it'll look like, but this is the first time when I'm happy to leave it in the hands of God. And I know that he'll put the right people in my path and show me the opportunities. Yeah.
Well, I hope there are going to be some great adventures waiting for you. Maybe some right woman for life. Arizona is still one of those states where it's okay to be a man and it's okay to be a woman.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're going to have a blessed time there.
Yes.
Before we will wrap up, I have one more thing, and I'm going to ask you that just because of your background. Is there something you would like to say to people about the whole Ukraine situation? Is there something you would like to express, or the way how you feel about it? Is there something that is on your mind?
I think it's tragic, all the innocent life that's being lost in this predicament. And I pray all the time for this to end. Personally, I'll just say outright that I'm not very well versed in geopolitics. I'm rather ignorant when it comes to it. To me, it does seem that there's something more going on than meets the eye. And when I see the mainstream media constantly and very consistently and deliberately push a very particular message again and again and again, to where it dominates in our society, and everybody just assumes that this is how you're supposed to feel about it. That to me is a huge red flag. So I was actually, for this reason, interested in going to Russia myself, to talk to people on the ground and to see what the atmosphere is like there, and what the zeitgeist culturally is on this subject. And beyond that, I really support these humanitarian organizations that are helping Ukrainian people. I have my family there, my father, my brother, my grandfather, and they're okay, thank God. I love Ukraine. I usually go there about every year and a half. So,
the people of those countries are always the victims.
Yes.
It's always the global politics that goes into that, and it's kind of weird that people have no problem to cheer to one or the other side, because technically you should cheer only for the people, not for the global oligarchs.
Exactly.
On either side.
Yes.
Like, none of them care about you, like literally none. But when you see, like, on one side, on the West, the propaganda, man, it's killing me. But then you see on the other side, on the East, the propaganda as well. You see, like, this is not a simple thing, and it's not just a war that is just going on. There are many things that are going on, and I cannot wait to talk more about that with, like, some people even here, because people like you, I think, are the people who should be speaking freely how they think about it. You should feel no hesitation to say something. First of all, you are there, you are from there. On another way, like, you are experienced American soldier on the other way. And on the third way, you are not a dummy. You traveled the world, you lived places, you did things. Like, you should not feel that there is something that you cannot say. That's why I wanted you, to say whatever you want, just the way how you feel it. And I'm really, like, thankful that you did so.
I appreciate that, Mike.
Yeah, because, man, honest conversation nowadays are very rare. Because once you read the YouTube policies, they restrict that. They restrict literally free conversation about anything you really want, especially about this topic. It's very heated nowadays.
Yeah, Jesus tells us the world will hate you if you speak the truth. So
seems about right.
Yeah. So to me,
seems about right.
Speaking the truth and having authentic conversations is the only way to be. The rest is kind of comical.
Yeah, damn. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That was great. I'm kind of like mad that you're leaving, but I wish you the best, and maybe one time again, you know.
I would love that. Thank you for having me, Mike. This has been awesome.
Yeah,
I should mention this has been my first time on a podcast, something I've dreamed of for a long time. So thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Nice. Thank you. All right. So Joe and John are gonna be the second podcast you're gonna be on.
That's right. Here in a few hours.
In a few hours.
Yeah.
Damn. It's gonna be still fresh, so you could compare us. Damn, that's bad. It's bad. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening or watching. Goodbye. Pokud vás tento díl zaujal, tak tady jsou další díly. A tady jsou další klipy. Mějte se.